And I invite you to set an intention for this time, something that you'd like to get. So, happiness. You go to the dictionary, look up happiness, it says a state of well-being and contentment. It's hardly descriptive of our world right now, it seems to me. That's the vibe I get, is that there is a great deal of discontentment and a real lack of well-being. So I began to wonder as I was preparing this, if I'm not happy, what am I? So I went online and Googled feeling chart or feeling graph, and came up with this circular graph that shows the basic feelings in the center, and then all the cousins of those feelings as the circle expands. And it was interesting because happiness occupied like about 20% of the pie, of the whole pie. And the rest of it were basically the emotions that are associated with upset and negativity and so forth. It seemed to it seemed to represent graphically what life can be like. Um, it can be largely an experience of a variety of unhappiness with occasional moments of happiness. So the next question that I began to ponder is happiness something we get? Is happiness something that we acquire? Certainly, advertisers tell us this. Um, uh, the organizations promoting products tell us that if we have the right car, if we drink the right beer, if we find the right soulmate, we'll be happy. Certainly, those things can add to our happiness, but do they really create it? Is my question. And I've concluded no. I've concluded that happiness is something that we're born with, and it's something that we have, and that our happiness becomes a victim to those all the rest of those other feelings when events come along and trigger them. That our happiness gets buried by life experiences. And the evidence for this idea that we are born generally in a state of happiness really comes when we look at kids. You look at children, they're present, they're creative, they're uninhibited, they're playful, they're generally happy. Then something happens. And I offer this example from my life. When I was a kid, I loved to sing. Show me a kid who doesn't love to sing, right? And in the fifth grade, I was in music class and I was singing away with all the other students, having a grand old time. And the music teacher was going around the room and leaning in and listening to each of us individually. And then she'd go to the next student and listen. And she got to me, and I noticed she frowned and she stood up straight and she tapped me on the shoulder and she said, "Paul, don't sing, you're a monotone." And then she moved on to the next student. So I sat there, no longer singing, looking around, noticing that the other students were looking at me. What do you think I concluded on that occasion? Any guesses? Well, one of the conclusions I came to is I'm not good enough to sing. Another one I came to is all the kids know it and they think less of me. And another one was if I ever try to sing again, I'm going to feel awful like I do right now. I judged myself that day. Yeah, Neil, I was right. I suddenly became different. That's right. It was as though a verdict had been passed. I was judged, verdict passed, and the verdict was I am not worthy of being heard. And it would be a long time before this judgment was overturned on appeal. So I didn't sing for almost 50 years. If I felt the urge to sing and I was sober, alarm bells would go off in my subconscious. And somewhere deep down in the canyons of my thinking, a voice would begin to whisper, no, 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 you're not good enough. Don't sing. If you do, you're going to feel really, really bad. So that day, I created a limiting belief that went, I am unworthy of being heard. So as I moved into adulthood and had the urge to sing, that intention, I want to sing, immediately came into competition with my brain saying, don't sing because you're going to feel bad. And these two intentions, these two competing intentions, created a feeling of unhappiness. We all go through this to some degree. We all have competing intentions. We have a heartfelt desire that runs into resistance or a block from some belief. And again, it plays out beneath our level of awareness. When we deny ourselves the experience of happiness, and that's what that's what so many of us are missing is the chance to be childlike, is the chance to be our true self, the chance to be authentic, because we're having these competing intentions. So when we're denied that opportunity to be ourselves, we're closing the door on who we are as well as the emotional and spiritual center of our well-being. And there's a beautiful quote around this by Dr. Robert Holden, who wrote a wonderful book on happiness. He's one of my teachers and mentors. This is what he said about happiness. He said, the purpose of happiness is to acquaint you with your true self. The purpose of happiness is to help you follow your joy. The purpose of happiness is to help you, encourage you, inspire you to be a Renaissance worker on this planet so that you never, ever have to do a day of work in your life. You will simply be expressing your heart and soul, and you will help the world evolve in the direction of love thereby. I'll read that one more time. The purpose of happiness is to acquaint you with your true self. The purpose of happiness is to help you follow your joy, to help you, encourage you, inspire you to be a Renaissance worker on this planet so that you never ever have to do a day of work in your life. You'll simply be expressing your heart and soul, and you will help the world evolve in the direction of love thereby. Dr. Robert Holden. So, what do we do about this? What can we do? So, what to do, number one? If you want more happiness, find someone you trust, talk about your feelings, talk about your thoughts, talk about your dreams and what brings you joy. Now, women seem to understand this instinctually because they process their feelings by talking. Men watch football. Any guess as to the ratio of the number of words used by men and women in a given day? By the way, Belinda, his name is Holden, Holden, Robert Holden. Um, that's true. Some women do not speak a lot, but these are all, these, Neil says 60-40. It's about 3-1. So choosing someone you trust who will listen, who will not jump in and start giving you advice right away is powerful when it comes to understanding your limiting beliefs. Uh, Again, mine being, I'm unworthy of being heard, created that day in the fifth grade music class. Limiting beliefs are like mold. They hide out and they fester in the dark. Bringing mold out into the sunlight puts an end to it. And there's a great expression that comes out of 12 step. Um, you're only sick as your secrets. And there's a great deal of truth about that when it comes to the world of addiction. Now, some of us might find it difficult to talk about what makes us happy. We may not really know. It's not that unusual. If you've grown up surrounded by people who treat you badly, take advantage, betray you, if self betrayal has been a way of life until now, you may not have had the chance to consider questions like, what do I need? What do I want? What the heck would make me happy? So it requires patience sometimes to talk about these things. And that's why it's so important to find someone or perhaps even a small group in which you can uh, have the freedom and the space to get it out. And when we begin to talk about or we begin to investigate what we're thinking, what we're feeling, some people run into thoughts like, this is not productive. What are people going to think? Um, yes, that activity makes me happy, but it's too expensive, or I'm too old to do that. So, by the way, my singing story has a happy ending, and this is it. So, I ended up going back to school about 12 years ago. Got a degree in spiritual psychology. Second year of the program, they had us take on a project, something heartfelt, something we'd always wanted to do, something creative, and something that would test us, that would push the envelope on our discomfort. So I took on singing. I was be- I was becoming aware of this limiting belief of unworthiness about being heard. So I took singing lessons. I began to perform open mics around town. I recorded 10 of my songs with professional musicians and then gave a concert. And as I walked off the stage from giving that concert, overcome, really overwhelmed with wonderful feelings of accomplishment, I realized that I could do essentially anything I wanted to do, and the only block was here between my ears. So happiness is not a frivolous pursuit. It's so important. It's, in my experience, if I'm feeling happy, it's a sign that I am on the right spiritual path. You see, the great irony is if I still had this limiting belief, and it's not all gone, but if I had this overwhelming limiting belief that I was unworthy of being heard, I wouldn't be here right now. I wouldn't be talking to you. I would be so racked with self-doubt that this would be undoable. The whole abundance channel thing would not have happened. It's to me a supreme irony that people in the comments on the abundance channel tell me they just enjoy the sound of my voice, that it's comforting, and that apparently the words are secondary. Who knew? Who knew? So Can we be happy when things change? Because when things change, it tends to get a little more challenging, doesn't it? Change can bring with it the pain of loss. You know, if someone passes, we have to grieve. We have to move through the pain by feeling it. And I would never suggest that we have to be happy in the face of traumatic events. Repressed feelings will always come back to haunt us. We have to process the pain of a divorce, the loss of a job, betrayal by a loved one. Eventually, we have to move on. We all experience pain. Suffering, however, is optional. We all experience pain, but the suffering is optional. When things change, there's a guaranteed way to pull the veil over our happiness, and that is by judging what has happened. Those of you who followed me have heard me say this, and it's so important, it's worth repeating. When we judge, we suffer. When we judge, we suffer. Belinda asks, am I recording? I think so. Oh, recording now. Oh, music. Yes, I have been. I have been. Um, yes, the suffering is optional. Well, first, so what do I mean by judge? We're judging when we have a negative opinion and it has an emotional charge to it. If you or someone you know has been suffering long-term emotional upset connected with a person or an incident, and it's been going on for years, I can guarantee you they're judging. They're saying things like, this is bad, this shouldn't have happened, she's wrong, he's evil. Those are the sounds of judgment. So the antidote to judgment is acceptance. What is acceptance? Well, the definition of acceptance is the action of consenting to receive. The action of consenting to receive. Something has happened. It might be painful, but I'm open to the possibility that something beneficial might come out of this. If we are able to practice acceptance in the face of change, the opportunity to maintain happiness goes up dramatically. The problem with judgment is that it creates and sustains what I call an emotional toxin. It's like this poison, and it clouds my ability to make loving choices, to make choices that can bring really new and profound experiences of happiness. Let me tell you another story from my life. In another lifetime, I was a camera operator working on movies, television shows, and early on as a camera operator, I got a break. I was hired to begin work on a brand new series, 7 months of employment. Um, my wife was pregnant. We were going to have our first child in the fall. This was springtime. Um, the week before we began, I went out and spent a bunch of money on a really nice sound system. I did the first 5 days and got fired. I was absolutely distraught. I believed that it triggered a lot of limiting beliefs. I'm not good enough, I think, being the most profound one. Uh, I felt like the train had left the station. I had been left behind. I was convinced my career was doomed. I would be blackballed. The word would get around. I was in deep, deep despair. I was so consumed by judgment, this negative um, story I was making up, that I really couldn't be there for my wife who was going through issues around the pregnancy. Just wasn't available to the extent I might have been if I had practiced acceptance. Um, cut to the quick here. Because I got fired, I became available to work on a project with a cameraman who was new to the country. He hired me 2 months later to work on The Abyss. And while we were working on The Abyss, he was hired by Spielberg to do Spielberg's next movie. And I went right along with him. Having done this Spielberg picture, I was suddenly hot property. And within a year or two was easily in the top 10 camera operators in the country. I was getting lots of calls. Would not have happened had I stayed on the television show. So, I created this catastrophic picture of my future based on judgments. Shouldn't have happened, and so forth. Um, and yet, this is what actually played out. So we get to the next what to do in terms of up leveling happiness in your life. Notice when you're judging. Notice how it makes you feel. And then get into the habit of replacing judgment with acceptance. Stephen Covey wrote a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and he tells a beautiful story about judgment. He got on the subway early one Sunday morning. There was a handful of other passengers in the car. At one of the stops, a father and his 4 kids got on. The dad sat down, and the 4 kids just went apeshit. They went crazy. They were bouncing off the walls. They were disturbing everyone. And Covey sat there looking at the dad, getting very upset. His anger was rising, rising, rising. And he finally stood up, went over, put his finger in the guy's chest and said, "What kind of a father are you? Your kids are creating havoc here." And the dad kind of snapped out of it and said, "Oh, wow, yeah, I guess I should do something." Their mother died 20 minutes ago and were a little distracted. And Covey, of course, went from anger to sudden compassion and empathy like that. And it caught him, found himself caught in this huge judgment. So it's extremely important to notice if we're judging. And I would say the most important judgments to notice are the ones we have about ourselves. That limiting belief that I created at 9 years old about singing, I'm unworthy of being heard, that's a judgment. The 3 big self-judgments that I see in my work with clients are: I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable. And I would suggest that self-judgment, and again, these self-judgments are percolating away at the subconscious level. Most of us are not aware of them. We just experience discomfort and unhappiness and resentment and addiction and suffering. And I would suggest that self-judgments are the number one cause of human misery on the planet. And that's why the awareness of them is so important. We have these self-judgments going, and one of the ways that people deal with their self-judgment is to project onto others, to project onto other people, to blame. They blame government, they blame Leaders, they blame institutions, they blame the people closest to them. In terms of what to do, become aware. Just watch when you're judging. Watch when you're judging. Watch how you feel. Yeah, Neil says you're right. It's easy to let the heat of the moment make you judge. You're getting better at it, right? I'm often glad I say nothing after the fact, right? Yeah, Neil. There's this moment, right? There's stimulus and response, and there's this gap here where you have the option of what that reaction is going to be. Now, most of the time, I I'm triggered. I have a reaction, and then I catch myself here, and I go, oh, I watch that reaction. I say, whoa, let's back up. Let's back into the gap and make another choice. My instinct, my animal instinct, is to do that, but nah, it's not going to work. Any judgments? Any judgments come down this week with you guys that that you're recognizing? I get it when I open up the New York Times every morning. It's still a challenge to read the headlines without slipping into "oh my God, everything's going to hell" um, mindset. And I'm really concerned about people who leave, the news on 24/7 and just the effect that has. Belinda says absolutely had to pray, meditate, walk, and repeat. Good for you. Bravo. So why does change make it so difficult to maintain happiness? Most of us to some degree are uncomfortable with change. We long for a span of time in which that's free of change. We call that a comfort zone. It never lasts. Why are we so predisposed to resist change? So it turns out there's a portion of our brain that keeps us alive. I like to call it the survival brain. It's tasked with keeping our hearts beating, our lungs breathing, the important chemical secretions in our body going. It does this all below our level of awareness. In terms of evolution, it's the oldest part of our brain. And if there's one thing this part of our brain despises, it's change, because change literally can bring death. Our brain this part of our brain wants to keep everything static. Foreign body invades our system. It kicks into gear the various biological processes to bring us back to stasis, and then everything is good again. So this part of our brain looks at reality dualistically, which means it's either good or bad. It's either life giving or death invoking, and there is no in between. Now, it turns out that the survival brain exerts a tremendous influence on our behavior, and again, on the subconscious level. So the unexpected change is viewed by our survival brain as a threat. It's judged as good or bad. And one of the greatest tools on the tool belt of this part of this survival brain is fear. It loves to create a picture of the future that is bleak and threatening. It's a future event appearing real, right? Leela says, we are programmed to fear the unknown. Yeah, that's another way of putting it. Yeah. But again, if we're aware of this, if we can catch ourselves recognizing, oh, I am leaping to the conclusion that the future uh, is catastrophic, and it's not based on any evidence. This is not something I know with certainty. If we can look at our past, if I could take back one thing in my life, it would be worry. It would be all the time I spent focused on future events appearing real that were dark, because essentially none of them actually panned out. Belinda says, I've realized that those comfort zones were not that comfortable. Because they required that you play small. Yeah. Yeah. So change comes in and you feel why. It's the gift in the long run, but it takes trust. Yeah. So one of the tools here is a thing called faith, whatever your version of faith is, and faith that the future is going to be okay. And one definition of faith that resonated with me recently was faith is what I see, is what comes in when I look at my history. When I look at the opportunities I had, how close I came to self-destruction, to um, to really getting hurt, to really suffering, and I didn't. Somehow it turned out all okay. So if that's been the pattern so far, is there any really significant reason to believe that it's going to change? So that's one way to look at faith. Honestly, it just makes more sense. If I'm going to picture the future and I have a choice whether that future be positive or negative, why not choose positive? There's no compelling reason to do otherwise. And of course, if we buy into this law of attraction thing, if we buy into the notion that our thoughts create our reality, then it really does make sense to think positively, to envision a future that's ideal. So when change happens and we recognize that our survival brain is influencing us, is encouraging us to judgment, we have the option to practice acceptance. We have the option to say, okay, this has happened. I'm, yeah, I may hurt a little bit, but I'm open to the possibility that I'm being called forward. I'm open to the possibility that maybe I need to do something different. Maybe there's a pattern in my life. Maybe there's a pattern in my behavior that needs to change. And again, when I view this emotionally upsetting event from that context, from the acceptance point of view, my mind is clearer. I can make a more reasoned choice about what to do or not to do. And this brings us to number 4 on the what to do's. Having practiced acceptance, decide what is or is not working for you, and then take one small, loving step to improve or correct it. Having practiced acceptance, decide what is or is not working for you, then take one small, loving step to improve or correct it. And that step can range from, I'm not going to do anything, I'm going to ignore it, I'm going to move on, all the way to, I'm going to hire a lawyer and pursue this in the legal system. Or it may be, I'm going to learn more about this situation so that I can make a better informed choice. It could be, I'm going to devote my life to fixing this situation. Whatever the decision is, if you can avoid judgment, you're making it from a position of clarity. You're not drowning in victimhood. You're not consumed with, he did this, she did that, he shouldn't have, he's bad, this is awful, blah, 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 blah. That does not help. Does not help when it comes to making the right loving choice going forward. So our power comes in the doing of what is for the highest good of all concerned. Our power is in making loving choices. And again, self-honoring choices trigger law of attraction. When I could get clear on what the loving choice is, I swear to God, life shows up differently. It's one of the most dramatic examples of my thoughts creating reality when I can consistently make the loving choice, the choice that's best for all concerned. But again, I want to emphasize, what's important is the action. The power comes from doing. And one of my favorite aphorisms around this is that God meets me at the point of action. As soon as I make a choice and act on it, something happens. The universe gives me feedback. I either get the awareness, that was a choice that seems to be working, or nope, that choice was not the strongest one, or, oh, that choice opened the door in something I wasn't even aware of. Wow, look at that. Thank God I took action, because now I see that. Now I'm looking around the corner. I have a different view. And again, it requires faith in whatever form you can find it to take action when you don't know how it's going to turn out. There is a degree of discomfort still for me when I'm facing the unknown. So last week I stumbled across this quote I just love, and it is so my experience, from Steve Chandler, another one of my teachers and a marvelous life coach. He said, get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable and your world will change. Get comfortable feeling uncomfortable and your world will change. I find that discomfort in moving forward, in pushing the envelope, doing things, speaking my truth in the context of I don't know how this is going to turn out. That's really an invigorating place to live life from. Yeah, Leela says, agreed. Stagnation is the opposite to action and feels disempowering. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, there's a real feeling of victim about stagnation, right? Yeah, God, I can't move ahead. It's there's a sense of resignation about it. And as soon as we take action, kaboom, things change. And you may have heard this, and I believe it completely, that you can't make the wrong choice. Every every choice, every action is going to bring feedback. And when we read the biographies of really successful people, it's often a story of failures, of stuff they tried, choices they made that didn't turn out as expected, but in fact opened the door to the the highly successful life this person led. Cool. Well, thank you guys. Again, if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. You can hit the thing and do that. And um, I really appreciate your showing up. I felt your support and your love. And yeah, if you can drop me an email at paul@paulbabin.com. If you have any more thoughts or questions. So I'm open to more comments and questions. I'll hang out here for a little bit. Thank you, Neil. Um, Maybe we can have a conversation. You can help me with this technical aspect of scheduling the live stream using OBS. I bet you can figure it out real fast. Thank you, Leela. Appreciate your showing up. Belinda. Oh, bless you, Belinda. I appreciate your unwavering support. All righty, guys. God bless. See you around.